This is the Page Publishing Book Club. Good evening. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini, along with my engineer, Rob Barrett. How you doing, Rob? You doing good? You're going to have a great night tonight because we have three guests right here in the studio. They are Carrie Alex, Frank Pellegrino, and Nick Rondi. Frank Pellegrino's name, it might ring a bell. He's been in a ton of movies and TV shows. He was in Goodfellas. He was the FBI agent on The Sopranos. Remember that, Rob? Yeah, well, he also owns the East Harlem restaurant Rayo's, where he grew up with Carrie and Nikki. And as it turns out, Nikki decides to write a book about the neighborhood. And Frank becomes his biggest cheerleader, encourages him when he hits writing blocks, tells him to keep going, tells him to keep writing. And Carrie, he's a businessman, so he's been instrumental in helping Nikki get the book out there. The name of the book is called The Nappers. Nikki, take us from the beginning. What's The Nappers about?
It's based on actual events, but naturally, we don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
No, we don't want to ever do that.
Nappers is short for kidnappers.
Okay.
But it's also a beautiful love story between two people that knew that the love was doomed from the get-go. He's a very charismatic, good-looking mob personality, very handsome, sharp dresser. And the love interest falls in love with him when she was 10 years old, and he's about 6 years older than her. And he gets into what we call the life, and he thought that he was in a life of honor, respect, honesty, and he finds out that the only thing it's about is money. And he loves East Harlem very much, and he gets disillusioned when some of the people in East Harlem that could have saved most of it just let it go, just for the sake of money. And he goes to jail because of somebody putting money to the forefront. And he meets his lifelong black friend who was from West Harlem. They meet in federal jail. And then two rednecks from down south who are absolute maniacs. They get together and they form this conspiracy. And it gave Joey an idea of how to keep up with his sweetheart because she becomes very successful in the fragrance business. And the rednecks tell him how they would kidnap black drug dealers in Georgia, South Carolina, hold them for ransom, get the money. They knew that they couldn't go to the cops. So Joey comes up with this idea to do the same thing to people that he knows that are in the drug business. They can't go to cops, and they can't even go to their friends because drugs was supposedly a no-no. And that's where the term the nappers comes up.
You've got some great characters there.
Yeah, it's a really, really compelling story. And it takes you from when, with his brother, how they were in the orphanage, and a prominent East Harlem wise guy got them out of the orphanage and noticed that Joey was a natural for the life, what we call the life. He was a natural street kid. The book will tell you the rest.
How many people can relate to that, though? He saw his community just go down the tubes, and now this is his revenge. How great is that?
Right. And, that's why Rayo's is so important to East Harlem.
Well, it survived.
Yes.
Basically, this is simply a love story. And it's both a love story about loving your brother, loving your family, loving your neighborhood. The love story between Joey Rendino and Carol in the book is really the magnificent obsession for both. He was her obsession, she was his obsession. And yet they knew it couldn't really be, or not that it couldn't be, but it shouldn't be. And I think that's what's fascinating. And Nikki had a way of digging into these characters and giving them a life. And I think the thing that I was always stressing about with Nick as he wrote the book was I like to see a little bit of reality. If there's something that you write that I don't quite believe or think is nonsense or I don't think it belongs, I'll say that. And Nicky, of course, understands. There isn't anything he doesn't understand. But I was looking for motivation and for reality. And Nick knew that. So every one of these characters in this book, they're strongly motivated. And their motivations make sense. It's not ridiculous. It's based on logic and so on and so forth. But again, it's fascinating the way Nikki has entwined neighborhood, people, relationships, love, all in this one book, which makes it totally different, okay, from what people have seen ever since The Godfather. It's in the same genre, however, it is separated by the love story, which makes it totally different. It's a totally different book, and ultimately, hopefully, it'll turn into a wonderful movie. I think a great movie.
Now, you just published this book, right?
Yes.
And I want to get to this in a second, the screenplay. But how did you find Page Publishing?
That was Carrie Alex. You see?
Carrie found him.
Well, this is a great trio we have here. Frankie, I could describe Frankie as I would describe an octopus. His tentacles go way, way, way out. I mean, he has so many friends, so many people that he's helped. And Rayos has been so helpful with the book. And then Carrie's the guy that gets things done. About a week and a half ago, Frankie invited us out to California. And Nick Pileggi happens to be a good friend of Frank's. And Nick endorsed the book. And I don't know if I'm at liberty to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. We met with a prominent producer that has a great interest in the book. He loves the book, and he loved the food in Rayos in L.A.
There's a Rayos in L.A.?
Yes, we have a Rayos in Hollywood. Yeah, on Sewage Street.
How is that possible? How could you take it out of Harlem and put it?
It's possible.
My
son runs that one.
Okay.
And he's great at it. But this meeting we had in L.A. with Carrie and Nikki and myself with Mr. Pileggi was simply wonderful because Nick, as you know, endorsed the book. He's on the back cover of the book, the front cover too. And Nick likes the book. And if Nick Pileggi, likes a book, well, then there's got to be something very, very special about it. And Nick really does like the book. And we also met with some other people who are interested in perhaps making a film out of this book because I think it would make a great film. And so we were very excited at having this meeting. And the results so far have been wonderful. And now Nick and Carrie and we've got a couple of other people working on this, and we're in the process of writing a treatment for the script. And I think it's going to be a brilliant movie simply because it's a brilliant book, and that's how these things get started.
Now, when you start doing that, as you're writing, do you start seeing, who's going to play? Do faces, do actors come to mind that you're like, man, that guy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Who?
Yeah. Well, there's one part that Frank Pellegrino is just absolutely perfect for because Frank because Frank understands what the book is really about, and every character in the book is a real character, and there's a character in the book by the name of Nadine, who happens to be in Rayos almost every day. She's still alive. Every single character I knew from the neighborhood. Even as I'm writing The Boys of Forever Now, the book now, I have to be honest with you. Sometimes I get so emotional that I have to stop writing because all of these people are gone.
Yeah.
And they've meant so much. They've meant so much to East Harlem. And the neighborhood, when I was growing up, it wasn't a ghetto. It was a neighborhood. Nobody went without eating. If I was a little boy walking to school, somebody would call me in, either to a grocery store or La Tagina store, and say, here, take this bread and butter. Here's a little cup of coffee. Eat it on the way to school. And that was the neighborhood. The people were the neighborhood. Every day of my life, I envision myself on that fire escape, daydreaming, listening to Sinatra, coming from the jukebox. That was my life and it's never left me.
How nice, though, that you can recreate it, that you can bring it back and you can let us see it now because it is so vivid in your mind that you're able to describe it in such a way that you give us a window to what that was like then.
Well, one book reviewer, you thought that the three of us wrote the review. That's how good it was.
Aw, that's awesome.
Because she said that we put her right in the streets of East Harlem. She smelt the marinara sauce. She could taste the pizza. You know, she could hear the music. And you know what? When you write something that's real, it comes out.
Yeah, it translates for sure.
So hopefully people will understand it, even if they live in Paducah, Kentucky.
Hey, who are the two Southern guys? They sound like characters.
They're the Miller brothers. They will last in your memory, believe me.
So, okay, now things in Hollywood, they don't move fast, right? How long does this process take?
You never know, but I would imagine about a year.
About a year? That's not
About
bad.
a year, not bad. Yeah.
They may not move fast, but we help push them to move fast.
Carrie, speak, please. Tell a little more.
Carrie, tell us.
We haven't heard from you yet.
That's okay.
Because he's busy
No,
pushing.
It's true. We moved this along. It took 8 years, but it seems like we did this overnight. It was a labor of love. Loved the genre. As I said, we began speaking about it, and I said, I love this. And Nick had a vision then. I love the genre. I consider myself a little bit of a historian on it, and I said, this is something I've never, ever heard about. And I've known almost everything that's gone on, in our long lives of 70-odd years. And I said, I'm interested. I want to help put this thing together and make it happen.
It's been an 8-year-long process already, so now another 9. Maybe you can get this put to bed in a decade.
But without Carrie, who's a real pusher and an organized man, and he's always on the computer, and he keeps things going, and he doesn't let up, and he's always on top of the project. And whoever has to be spoken to or whatever, Carrie will arrange somehow to do that and keep things moving. And Nick never stops writing, which is great. And I just enjoy watching the two of them work. I do the least amount of work. They do the important stuff.
Well, you feed them, right? You feed them.
Right, I feed them. That's good.
Carrie, what's going to happen now is everybody that I interview now that's got an idea for a screenplay is going to say, how do I get in touch with that guy, Carrie? I'm going to say, I don't know.
Alice, for this, it's my pleasure because we have formed a lifelong friendship. For everybody else, I'm very expensive.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. This was a pleasure.
Thank you.
I can't give you any contact info here, but I can tell you that if you go and you eat at Rayo's in East Harlem, you might run into one of these guys, right? It's a possibility. I just want to point out something real quick. Nick Ronde is a very lucky guy to be surrounded by friends like this, but he's also a first-time author, just like a lot of you listening right now. And even though he was in construction most of his life, he was a writer, and he kept writing. And when he decided to write a book, he wrote about things closest to his heart, his friends, his family, and his neighborhood. Something to think about while we take a quick break. We'll be back right after this. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you. Printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
Welcome back to the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. We have a father and son team on the line, Pete in Champaign, Illinois, and Peter in Carbondale. And they wrote It Takes a Village, the integration of the Hillburn school system. Peter, explain who did what with this book.
He's actually the storyteller, and I'm the one who co-authored the book with him. He was in the segregated school system.
Well, I was born into it. My dad and mother were involved since about 1930. And Hillburn is about 40, 50 miles northwest of New York City. So the school system was evidently dominated by a wealthy white man in our village. In fact, he ruled most everything. When my mother went to school there was only one school, so it was integrated. But this wealthy person decided that they were going to build a separate school for the colored kids because we're pretty well mixed up with Dutch, Native American, and Negro. So anyway, my father, realizing this, decided he would try to do what he could. I didn't know this until after it happened, to integrate the school system.
Did people in the community want to be integrated? I mean, what year are we talking about?
they didn't dare to open their mouths. If you didn't vote Republican point blank, and if you didn't adhere to the wishes of this one individual, there was no work for you. And he was the chairman of the Building and Loan Banking System. He was the chairman of the Board of Education. You just couldn't get anywhere, really.
What year are we talking about?
The schools were segregated from the early part of the 20th century up through 1943.
As they were in many communities.
It was never talked about in the North.
Right.
That's why we think the story is so important.
Right.
Because we hear about Mississippi and Alabama, but you don't think about suburban New York City as having this big problem.
So was your dad able to rectify this situation?
With the help of Thurgood Marshall, yes. It took him from 1931 until 1943 to eliminate the segregation of the school system.
How did he get the help of Thurgood Marshall?
That's kind of the interesting part of the story. My grandfather was the local NAACP chapter president, and he worked with the man from New York City's NAACP called William Andrews, and my grandfather was the one who was reporting what was going on the ground and sending the information that the NAACP needed. He couldn't get the families in town to support anything dramatic to integrate the schools, so he finished his term, and the woman who followed him, Marion Van Dunk, she continued, and the NAACP thought they had enough information that they called their legal team in, and Thurgood Marshall was the lawyer assigned to the Hilburn case. And he came to our village and led the parents on a strike. The word is that he padlocked the doors and said that if the colored children can't go here, no children will go here. And they kept the children out until the New York State Department of Education ordered the integration of the school system.
What a great story you have.
The surprise for us is we didn't know about it. And even my dad, who's 87, my grandfather just never talked about it. And I'm a lawyer, and I went to law school while my grandfather was alive, and he never talked to me about that while I was in law school either. He was a very unassuming man and just thought it was what he was supposed to be doing.
So finally you were able to gather all of the information and put it together in a book.
One of my nephews received a call from the Civil Rights Commission in Rockland County, and he told me that my father had been chosen as one of the representatives of the civil rights recognition in the county. And I was surprised to hear that, really. He lived to be 95 years old and passed away in 1983. Now, this was
2012.
You just found out about this in 2012?
Yes, I did. I was handed like a scrapbook of all of the writings, communication between Pop and the person in New York City that he was involved with on postcards since 1931.
Wow, you should take this book into every history class.
Yeah, we've started a book tour, and I've done a couple of lectures, and my parents have been with us, and people are very fascinated with the story, and book sales are going pretty nicely already.
Did this tyrant go down, the town tyrant?
He was defeated in a village meeting by Thurgood Marshall and a few others.
So in the end, justice was done. Sounds like another good movie, doesn't it, Rob? Next up, we have Clyde Young. He wrote Food for God's Children.
Yes, ma'am. And a sword to slay the dragon.
And a sword to slay the dragon.
Yeah, the dragon is a symbol of kingdoms that man has built on their own nature. And the knowledge and understanding is the sword is the word. And the word brings the truth, and it gives us knowledge and understanding of how we need to change our character nature and go to higher enlightenment. It's like a code. Now, man has searched for centuries to find the answer, the code for the Bible, and now we found it. And it ain't no big deal. In the book that I wrote, I have the code, and it explains the process of how that works. It tells who we are, where we come from, the purpose of life, and even in prophecy of what the future holds.
How did you break the code?
Well, I studied the Bible all my life. And I read so much old religious myth, and I just got tired reading, so I went to just studying the Bible, and I got all the religious writing out of my mind. And I run across a place in Isaiah 28 says, "Who will God teach knowledge, make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from milk and drawn for breast, for line must be upon line and precept upon precept," which means joined together. So I took that process and I started studying the Bible. And it was a strange thing that I don't think I'm real religious. I don't put myself off like I'm some great person. I'm just a common person. But I had a divine influence started helping me when I started that process. And I found the answer in the Bible, the code for the Bible that people has looked for centuries. And it's in there for everybody to see. It's for all of us. That's the reason I wanted to write the book, so that mankind can look to a higher enlightenment and understand.
How are you telling people about this book?
Well, I've started off by getting it printed for y'all, and I'm passing out copies, and I'm beginning the process. Everywhere I go, I explain to people and show them. And in the book, it has a reference to it. It's no religious talk in it. The book has proof of everything I got wrote in it, where to find the answers, and it even ties it into history, how the Bible correlates with history, see? And it's the prayers for the next age of enlightenment that we already started into. But before we get there, we're going through the worst thing a man's carnal nature has ever been, our human nature. We're going into the next world war. It's known in the Bible as the Great Tribulation. And we got to experience that. But as we do, we come into this new knowledge, and it's going to bring us out into a new age of enlightenment. Everybody on earth needs to know what's in this book. Not just read this book that I wrote, but they need to come to an understanding of the knowledge that's in that book, of who we are, where we come from, what's the purpose of life, so that we can all make a sober decision. And with that knowledge and understanding, we'll have something that'll give us a desire and strength to turn to a better nature. Religion has deceived us. When we have that natural calling in our spirits to turn to the way of love of right, then we think the process is we go to a religious system like different denominations. And when we do, that's the mistake. It has deceived us. And so when I found the code for the Bible, it was just amazing. So many people for so many centuries has looked for it, couldn't find it, but now we've got it. Us, the people of the earth, has got it.
All right, Clyde Young, thank you. Know the code. Our next author, Evelyn Dolgus, wrote about her life, as so many of our authors do, in the hope she might be able to be an inspiration to someone else. The name of her book is When the River Bends. You ready, Evelyn?
Absolutely. When the River Bends is a memoir of my life, and it is the journey I've went through. The highs and the lows, really most of the lows. I had a real bad period in my life where just everything went wrong. How I struggled through it, how I got through it, and how I came out on the other side of it. Going through illness, car accident, divorce, deaths in the family, working hard to keep my financial self afloat and my children, being a single mom all alone in financial ruin, and how I got through it.
How did you get through it?
I'll tell you what, my faith. If you look at the cover of the book, it's a doorway with a river. If you look through the doorway, there's a water coming through the doorway and a river out it with bends. And on the doorway is an SOS life preserver hanging there. So I designed the cover myself. The river is the river to your life, not just mine, anybody's. And the doorway is the doorway you enter when you're born. And you go down this river, and you can only see so far, though. You can only see one bend in that river. You don't know how many bends are going to come and go. But for me, when I always hit the hardest bends, God always threw me that life preserver I needed. Stranger, money coming out of nowhere, whatever I needed, something came. That was my life preserver. God always threw it to me. So my faith really helped me get through this. I don't know how people do it without faith. When you're alone, it's very, very hard. But even though I was alone a lot of the time, I never felt alone because I always felt God was there with me.
What finally made you decide it was time to write about it?
You know, I have dyslexia, and I have double vision left for life from the car accident. And I'm not really a good reader because of the dyslexia. Words change up in my mind. It's just part of the disease. So to write a book for me was almost impossible. But by the 100th person telling me, you need to write a book, Evelyn, I finally thought, okay, maybe you're trying to tell me something, God. What would be the purpose of writing this book? But I look at some people who go through tragedy in their life and hardness, and they can't seem to find the way. They just can't get up. And so they quit, and they end up in really bad trouble, and and worse off than they started. They just don't know how to do it. So my hopes in finally writing this book was to hopefully give someone strength to get up when they can't find any more strength. Maybe this book will give them the strength to know that someone else did it, and this is how they can do it. They can get up and they can live.
What led you to Page?
I'm going to say that was a God thing again, because when I went to Page Publishing, I thought, I don't even know how to go out looking for a publisher. So I Googled it, and 2 publishers came up, and one was Page. And I started talking to them, and they weren't only a publishing company. They were exactly what I needed, because I needed someone to walk me through the process. And they were very good about doing that. They're very good to their new authors. Every time I needed help, I could always call Page. This was a very good company for a new author. And I do like the fact when I submitted the book, they told me how it was going to go. We're not going to hold your book up forever. We're going to tell you within a week. We have a process of 5 people who actually read your book, and at least 3 of them have to agree to publish it. They just were very spot on.
Are you selling?
I am. I just had my second book signing. I have 2 more to go this year here, but I'm working on several more. I actually had it written up in the paper locally here, and then they ran a giant 3/4 of a page, full-blown color, right on the front of a section of the Sunday paper, which went to the whole county here, which is helpful to me. A lot of people saw that. I had Page Publishing print up the bookmarkers they make to advertise your book for you, and I use those as business cards. Those are wonderful. I can't tell you how many times I've given them out on planes, trains, automobiles, wherever I go. I also did a local radio spot here on Easter Sunday. That was kind of out of the blue. I am working on other places to advertise it and go for it, but it seems to be selling so far. I'm not willing to give up. I guess you have choices, Alice. You can lay down and die, or you can get up and live. I chose life. I'm going to get up and live. I'm not going to be afraid to do things. My biggest fear is fear itself, and I won't let it conquer me.
I cannot think of a better way to end our show. Great advice, Evelyn. Get up and live. That's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. Thank you, Rob, for being the best and most patient engineer on planet Earth. Come back next week, same place, same time, 710 WOR for the Page Publishing Book Club. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and start writing.